This lighting is not flattering to my complexion, especially because my skin is awful. I wanted to do a short video. I was kind of jumping around a lot this weekend, looking for a topic. And what I kind of settled on was the TV show Constantine. There's a lot of stuff I wanted to do, but it required a lot more time, more interest, and I really like that show, and it's worth discussing, at least briefly. Constantine was a show on, oh goodness, what channel was that on? CBS, ABC? No, regardless, it's not on anywhere now. Maybe I can look it up real quick. NBC. Yeah, they're who's to blame for bringing it to us and then snatching it away. Terrible stuff. The TV show was based on the comic book Constantine, much more closely than any iteration I've seen or ever heard of. One of the complaints of the Keanu Reeves movies from a few years back is that while it was a fine show in its own right, the character didn't really match the comics. Real quick, it's worth mentioning, I've never actually read a Constantine comic book, but I'm very familiar with the character. It was a Vertigo comic book staple, much the same way Superman, for example, appears in lots of DC comics, ditto Iron Man, Captain America, and so on. Constantine was sort of the hard-boiled detective who's also an occultist. He's a demon-hunting exorcist with the affectations and the presentation of a hard-boiled detective, an old-timey dime store novel, old-time detective, like hard-boiled, trench coat, smokes too much, is always poor and in bad shape, and so on. You get the idea. A classic gumshoe. So it was a weird juxtaposition, and a very cool way of presenting the character was a very storied past that I'm not going to go into. It's quite long. I just want to focus on the TV show for now. One of the things about this character is that, yes, he does have magical powers, but they're mostly to get rid of demons. They don't actually generally help him at all in his normal real life. Makes him a very interesting character, particularly where he's surrounded with very formidable opponents. He's often very closely, power-wise, very closely tiered with them. Unlike, I don't know, Superman, Batman, or let's switch over to the Marvel side of that. I always felt like, especially the X-Men side, there was always like a new X-Men guy who's even more powerful than all the villains combined, and then you just have to keep ratcheting things up to make them more level, to make it a viable conflict. So, expanding a bit into all comic book genre stuff, TV shows and so on, you kind of have that balancing act of, yes, you want them to be powerful because that's cool, but at the same time, if they're so powerful, then how does normal anything affect them or interact with them? They become so disjointed, so removed from reality that they're not fun to watch anymore. Whereas Constantine, the supernatural would impose itself on reality or this town or this person or these people, and it would always be close. Like, he never sneezed and destroyed anything. He always had a fight ahead of him. He knew his shit. He was a very good exorcist, very good demonologist, but it was close. I guess is what I'm saying. It was a believable conflict, which made the character more real. And the world he was in seemed pretty real. It wasn't, crazy superheroes flying all over the place. Cool character. The TV show ran for 13 episodes from... I'm actually trying to keep a cheat sheet, and I'm utterly failing at this. From 2014 to 2015, I believe. 13 episodes. It was a neat show. I wish they made a second season. It was canceled shortly after because it didn't really have that great of ratings on NBC. I think it would have fared better if it were purely video on demand, or even Netflix maybe. Certainly I think, as far as a direct content provider, Marvel's smashing DC, and I think Constantine might be their ticket, might be their in, you know what I mean? Either way, the show is canceled. There's talk of a second season maybe coming up on CW. Maybe he's going to be a crossover character for Legends of Tomorrow. I kind of hope not. Legends of Tomorrow is a fine show, but it just doesn't sell me as far as realistic superheroes. I was following it very closely for a while in Flash and Arrow. Boy, am I getting off track here. But at the same time, it just got a little silly. It started to feel amateurish. It wasn't selling me. It wasn't as in-depth as the Marvel stuff. It's still in the CW stuff is still in a television format. And I'm discovering more and more I really don't like television, like normal broadcast television. Very little I want to see on normal broadcast television. The very format of wait for a particular day and time, here's your show, and now wait a week for the show to come back on, unless it's the mid-season, then you can wait a couple months. How's that feel? As I want this. Give it to me, please. Oh, cool. It's Daredevil. Here's your 13 episodes. I have no complaints about that. Other than I get to the end of them very quickly. I'd like to see something like that for Constantine. Otherwise, the show was excellent. It was much more mature. I like supernatural villains. It's like you don't have to explain why the bad guy is the bad guy. It's a freaking demon from freaking hell, trying to control people, eat people, express its dominion over the mortal world. It doesn't need a backstory the same way the Joker or someone like that would, where it's like, well, what's your motivation? Well, he's just crazy. Yeah, that's a weak motivation. It's very difficult to get a guy as a believable villain just because he's nuts. Now, the Nolan Batman movies did that like all crazy hell. They did a great job, and that was what was great about them, though. That was a challenge, and Christopher Nolan rose to that challenge like a boss. Constantine, it had a believable built-in protagonist. It had an interesting situation. The supernatural aspect of that was much more interesting than the four-color DC universe. Not to poo-poo it or anything like that, but I would rather... Oh, God, I would love to see a Vertigo cinematic universe. That would make me so happy. That would make me ludicrously happy. Which I'm very unlikely to get. I would love to see, which happened, incidentally, in the comics. They did a Justice League Dark, where you have Constantine meeting up with Madame Xanadu, Shade the Changing Man, Black Orchid, Swamp Thing, I guess, would be thrown in there somewhere. I'm positive they met up at some point. Zatanna, and all the kooky supernatural guys. In the Constantine TV show, we sort of got a bit of a teaser of that. We had the Spectre, who is another supernatural superhero from the 70s, I think, 70s comics, when it was, we can't have horror comics anymore, they have to be superhero comics, we're going to make a horror superhero comic, kind of, sort of. And I'm all about that. Give me more of that. And that's kind of why I like Constantine. It's a horror superhero. Done deal. I'm sold. Just don't cock it up, and we're good. That's what I want. Other than that, I don't want to spoil anything. You should check it. It has a complicated story, deep characters with a good deal of character arcs. They start somewhere, they change. You get characters who seem static, like, oh, there's this guy's his buddy. There must not be much there, but then in later episodes there's a conflict between Constantine and him. We learn backstories, blah, 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 blah. Lots of stuff happens. Characters develop and change. That would be good in any series, let alone this, which has some great window dressing. And very good effects. Great budget for this show. I understand why it got canceled. I could see it not being everyone's bag, and it's clearly an expensive show to make. So, So there's that. As far as my ratings go, what are the odds you're going to watch this and not like what you see? If you didn't know that this was a horror superhero, a supernatural superhero, I mean, it's has very few superhero cliches in it. It was a comic book. It was a comic book during the era, it started and ran during an era of Superman, Batman, and the rest. But if you're thinking that this is going to be like a superhero type thing, it doesn't play out that way. When it does, it's neat. But it's neat because it's different. It's not like a normal superhero thing. So there's that. Supernatural horror doesn't appeal to everyone, and if you came into this somehow thinking Constantine wasn't going to have demons or something, I guess. I mean, as it got killed for not having good enough ratings. That said, I can't imagine anyone who would go through the trouble of watching one full episode of this wouldn't at least have a clue about what they were getting into. And if you liked, there's a ton of shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Supernatural, but quite a few others. The American Horror Story, there's whole shows where it's sort of this gothic, supernatural theme to the story, and that's what made it interesting. How did you watch the show and not know what you were getting into? So I can't really say that. I'd say they're really good odds. If you see this, you're going to like what you're going to see. The acting is incredible. What was his name? Matt Ryan or something. Fantastic job for Matt Ryan. He did a great job. He is the quintessential Constantine. No one can take that away from him until someone does. And they're going to have a lot of work cut out for them. I used to think Christian Bale was the quintessential Batman. I'm told Ben Affleck killed it. I haven't seen all of Batman v Superman. I don't want to see all of Batman v Superman, but that's another ranty thing for another day. I'd say, odds you're not going to like what you're going to see. Let's say 1 in 8. There's a good chance you're going to like this. If you are willing to watch a supernatural horror, superhero-ish, let's say comic booky instead, because there were horror comic books. Vertigo was a thing that happened, and God knows I have most of them, especially from the early days. So odds are you're going to like this. After seeing it, say all 13 episodes, would you want to see it again? Well, let me restate that. Would I want to see that again? Yes, I do, actually. I haven't really gotten the time recently, but I would like to see that again. Not immediately. It's a pretty deep show. Some shows are more popcorny, like even if they have good writing and so on. I'm not sure I want to just dive into them again because they tend to be kind of dense and very deep. This is one of those shows. So I do want to see it again. I would watch it again if someone started. I have a number of housemates. If one of them said, hey, I want to start watching Constantine, I'd be like, okay, let's go watch Constantine. And I'd be perfectly happy sitting through all 13 episodes. Like, do them in over the course of like 2-3 nights, or maybe do a weekend thing. Like, that's not a bad way to spend a Saturday. If you haven't seen this show yet, check it out. I know, from what I understand, CW has free streaming. You don't even have to have, I don't think it's on Netflix. I know it's on Amazon Prime. I don't know if it's free on Amazon Prime. You might have to pay for the season, but please do, throw money at these guys. This was a great show. It deserved more than it got. It put out so well, it's a shame it got canceled. It really is. A very good show. Check it out. Yeah, that's all. I'm out.